Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Conversation Show powered by the Emerging India Forum, TEIF, and a tech partner, Prime Infotech Solution. Series is The Emerging Lawyer. Theme is Emerging Trends in Regulatory Law, Writing, Law and Technology. Today, we have with us Dr. Deborshi Barat, Counsel at S&R Associates and a distinguished academic with PhD from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. With expertise spanning AI, data privacy, ESG, and corporate advisory, Dr. Bharat's journey bridges the gap between academia and corporate law. So, welcome, Dr. Bharat, to today's Coffee Conversation episode.
Thank you so much, Mr. Virani. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to explain you the format. There are two rounds, which will be aware. The third is a rapid fire round, the fun round. You have to be witty, funny, and quick. So, we'll get this book out of technology. I'm an author of 15 books. This will be autographed and sent to you for your collection.
Yeah.
Okay. So my first question, Dr. Bharat, what inspired you to specialize in such diverse and cutting-edge fields like AI, data privacy, and ESG?
So, where I work currently at S&R Associates, I used to work here a long time back, and then I sort of went for studying and was doing lots of other things. Life happens, right? So when I came back, and I always in the interim period wanted to focus on policy and the broader aspects, which we as lawyers sometimes are not able to participate in, even if we have an interest or expertise in, because you need specialization. So when I came back, these are the things which are emergent trends of the future. So I just wanted to focus on these, and of course, the decade that I had spent outside of the law firm ecosystem gave me a lot of time to think about, a lot of time to get into the details. So which is why.
Wow. So now I'm curious. You are a counselor at S&R. So let me frame the question. What is the role of legal counsel at a law firm, and how different it is from in-house counsel at corporate legal?
So a counsel in a law firm is any of the peer group members of a law firm, as opposed to in-house counsel. In-house counsel, the nomenclature may be a little confusing for people on the outside, but a counsel is not an associate, is neither a partner. So in my capacity as counsel in S&R, I mainly look at some of these emerging trends, emerging areas of law. At the same time, I try to oversee the knowledge management, the learning initiatives within the firm. And like you mentioned initially, I also particularly focus on data privacy, ESG, regulatory issues therein, and now increasingly so AI.
Wow. Thanks for the clarification, because layman users out there, they get confused when they come to see counsel at law firm, in-house counsel at corporate legal. So what is it? But thanks for the clarification. Yeah, both are playing major roles in their ways. Now, Dr. Bharat, could you share some insights on the biggest challenges in AI and data privacy regulations today?
So the biggest challenges, I mean, we can talk for hours about this issue, right? But the biggest challenge off the top of my head would be that there's a certain amount of uncertainty. We are stuck in a situation where everyone's talking about it, especially AI. Although the data privacy law has been published more than a year ago, but we don't yet have the rules. So unless the rules come out, we won't have very specific clarity about how companies can, figure out their processes in place. Although we have a broad blueprint, so they have started preparing, and companies should prepare in anticipation of the published law. But while everyone is talking about AI and data privacy both, and there's a lot of interface between the two, the law is still in motion. We know, especially for AI, we know that there will be regulation, some sort of soft touch regulation in the future, but we still don't know what. The government has also, from time to time, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, the Union Minister, the Minister of State, even before this government, as well as in the incumbent government, have made statements officially saying that there will be some sort of maneuvering around the legal and regulatory framework. So there is anticipation, although it won't stifle innovation, but there will be some ways that the companies need to trim their hedges, so to speak. But we still don't know. So there is that anticipation. That is the biggest challenge, because this is the technology is moving so fast, developments are happening so fast that the law is struggling to keep pace, and that is understandable. We are in that moment in history, when technology is leading everything.
Wow. Okay. Let's get a conversation. What role do you see data protection playing in cross-border mergers and acquisitions?
So, in terms of cross-border M&A in particular, you know, trying to figure out what are the compliances and the parity between different regimes. So, India thus far did not have a robust data protection framework. We had one rudimentary law, which was not very clear, and it was mainly dealing with sensitive personal information. But now, the data protection law, which will come into force soon, expectedly, is much like Europe's law, GDPR. So it is stricter. At the same time, I think the government, the sense that we feel as participants in this process, is that it will not perhaps be as strictly implemented as Europe, just so that companies can ease into the process better. At the same time, the penalties are very high. So, in terms of cross-border M&A, there are a lot of exemptions which are available. So the ease of doing business approach that the government has had since 2014, I think, is continuing in this data protection regime as well. So we'll have to figure out how those exemptions can fit in. There are some exemptions. In some cases, there won't be exemptions available. And in any case, across the board, whether for domestic transactions or otherwise, even including in cross-border M&A, you have to figure out the new compliances. Obviously, in terms of cross-border M&A, you also have to make sure that you are in compliance with some extraterritorial jurisdiction. So, for example, whether it's the US, Europe, or any place in the Middle East or Southeast Asia, all of these regions are having their own data protection regimes these days, and it's only going to increase. A lot of them have mimicked or used the blueprint of Europe. So we have to make sure that we are all in compliance with all these regimes. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Next question, Dr. Barat. Could you explain how environmental, social, and governance ESG factors are impacting corporate advisory?
So, as you might know, and as some of your audience members might also know, but some may not be totally savvy with this process because it is relatively new. ESG, as you rightly pointed out, is the new buzzword, right? So we have had corporate social responsibility and other SEBI-regulated regimes in India as well, BRSR, and those are mainly applicable for the large listed companies. But ESG is something that investors are increasingly looking at, especially foreign investors. In other jurisdictions where ESG is more mature, investors are looking for the triple bottom line, as it were. You're not just looking at profits on the balance sheet, you're also looking at your ecological, environmental impact. Investors, other stakeholders are also interested about how sustainable are your practices. Recently, we've had a lot of landmark laws, landmark cases as well in other regions of the world, where greenwashing has been, is being used by advocacy groups, by members of the wider public, saying that you can't make false environmental claims. You can't say that you're environmentally cleaner than you are. There's a lot of pressure on big corporates, including the major IT and tech firms, the Apples, the Amazons, the Metas, the Alphabets, that you have to have sustainable practices, especially now with the AI revolution happening. Data centers are imperative for the future, and data centers are huge power guzzlers. So, ironically, while we're looking at technology, we are also concerned about carbon emissions, and that has to be bridged. So ESG will play that tricky role of that balancing act between two of the largest, in my mind, trends of modern times: technology and climate change.
Wow, beautifully explained. Okay. Now, now, how does your background in international trade and political economy shape your perspective on corporate law?
So, I mean, it happens all the time these days. I did not anticipate, frankly, Mr. Virani, that it would come into use so much. When I was specializing in some of these concentrations during my master's, uh, but I realized increasingly India is on an upswing right now, right? India is wooing the world, so to speak. There's a lot of plans, a lot of ambitions. Not all of them will materialize immediately because there are geopolitical constraints, there are macroeconomic limitations about how much one country in isolation can take things forward. At the same time, the thinking is there in place, and the mandate is there. The will is there to expand, whether it's India Inc. or the political establishment. So, keeping everything in mind, India is trying to sign these new treaties, whether free trade agreements or international investment agreements, getting into these plurilateral arrangements, these other framework documents with the US, with Southeast Asia, Japan, South Korea, with the Middle East, with Australia, with Europe. Uh, China is always looming large in terms of how do you see yourself vis-a-vis China, and India has by being such an important and large and competitive neighbor to China, India has a very interesting position to China. But China cannot be ignored, right? So everything, has to be seen in context. And increasingly, as lawyers, you can't be working in silos. You can't just be looking at a document or looking at a client in isolation. You have to look at the wider ecosystem. You have to keep up to date with global political developments because they are having immediate ramifications these days on how laws are being framed, on how businesses are looking to go ashore, offshore, how you are trying to accommodate investors. So everything is getting tied together.
Wow. So now, Dr. Bharat, what do you consider the most critical skills for someone looking to specialize in regulatory law?
Regulatory law, I mean, basically, see above, like what I just said. Other than that, regulatory law, there are all these regulatory regimes which are coming up in a very interesting way. So
Yes.
we've had generations of regulatory law, generations of regulatory practice in India, right? So I'm not citing specific eras, but at one point of time, we have emerged from a license Raj regime where things were very strictly under state control. And then there was a more laissez-faire approach where we opened up our economy and it was not really a free for all, but we're trying to emulate practices of the developed world. Now we realize that there are dangers there, as are the Europes and the USs of the world are also realizing that you need some regulation. So while you want to accommodate innovation, corporate ambitions, you also have to keep an ecosystem in place which protects investors, the public, companies as well. You have to insulate them from macroeconomic shocks, from geopolitical uncertainty, as well as day-to-day corporate governance issues. Because ultimately, if your system is sick, just because you let it be and trying to let everyone do what they want, the economy is not really a hand of God, an invisible hand kind of situation, which we realize. But there has to be some state oversight over everything. So, which is why regulatory law is almost impinging upon every practice area these days.
Wow. So now, Dr. Bharat, you did your master's, then PhD. What inspired you to go to the highest of doing a PhD, and what was the subject, and how was the experience doing LLM and PhD?
It was a great experience in a nutshell. Like I said before, I wanted to use my legal education and legal practice, the experience I already had at S&R Associates, as well as some independent litigation work that I did elsewhere. I wanted to use that as a base, and I want to expand upon that legal knowledge and get into some areas of policy, some areas of regulatory law, and look at how law is situated in the wider, perspectives. Uh, so to that extent, the LLM, and I actually first went for a Master of Arts in Law and Diplomacy, which is the cornerstone program, the keystone program rather, at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where I did a couple of masters. And then I realized that, because I'm not moving away from law, I'm not trying to become an economist late in life. So I thought doing an LLM is also essential. And then the PhD was motivated by, more personal considerations. I wanted to go get deeper into areas of law. It was in international investment law that I specialized, as well as, like you said, the political economy and, law and development as a wider paradigm.
Wow. So now my question next will be, if someone wants to do PhD, how should one go about and what are the things one should take into consideration, the subject and the college to consider?
So I think it varies, Mr. Virani. There's no quick answer, one size fits all kind of approach to this. I think PhD decisions are very personal decisions. It depends on your life, your journey, how you want to plan your future. And as most people would know, PhD, unlike maybe in some minute ecosystems in Europe, it is not very common or not even recommended uh, in terms of legal practice. So doing a PhD was something which was very personal to me. I don't have any regrets. I'm glad I did it. It helps me every day. It like in with any other process, whether educational or practitioner based, there are ways that it helps you. There's certain ways, experiences, some soft skills that you pick up, the ways of analyzing things, of looking at the world that you pick up while doing the PhD, even if they are not connected directly to your research areas, they help you in terms of work. So, in terms of where you choose to do a PhD, whether you want to do a PhD or not, for anybody who's in that space right now, it really depends. I'm happy to talk to them on a personal one-to-one basis if they reach out, but there's no general framework that one can follow.
Understand. Thanks for this guidance and in future also, if we come across anyone who wants to take a role into academia and build up skills, so we know whom to approach. Now, as you earlier said, you are into knowledge management at S&R. So, how do you go about building the knowledge management and learning process for the legal professionals at S&R Associates?
So part of it is actually drawing from, these emerging areas of law that I look at, because these are the things which are increasingly becoming bigger in terms of, ESG, for example, we spoke about it already. So even in terms of very bread and butter, plain vanilla key sectors like energy and infrastructure, renewable energy, electric vehicles, EVs, green hydrogen, investments, and a lot of M&A work, a lot of corporate transactions are increasingly being driven in this space. AI offers both in terms of offers opportunities in terms of both compliance as well as investments. Data protection is more a compliance issue, but because of the high penalties that India has emulated from the European blueprint, that is something no company can ignore anymore. uh, and almost it affects almost each kind of company and each company of every size in the country. So I draw from these, and some of the core areas. There are other people who have been doing this for many years continuously. So they are also taking learning sessions, training sessions for internal purposes for our lawyers, the fresh grads who join S&R Associates. So I try to coordinate these initiatives, and as for myself alone, I try to focus more on the big ticket issues for the future, and I try to actively look out for, okay, what's going to happen like in the next 5 years. Where do I see, the Indian legal industry focusing on? So that sort of a long-term horizon approach really helps. And I mean, I don't know whether I have great predictive ability or not, but it helps to have an intelligent assessment of the ecosystem.
Wow, beautiful. Now, Dr. Bharat, how has technology helped you and which legal tech tool has impacted your work?
So, as you would know yourself, Mr. Virani, legal tech is an essential part of a law firm, because a lot of documentation processes, a lot of technological tools that are that make our jobs a lot easier, if not essential, to use, Otherwise, in terms of handling voluminous documents, multiple rounds of document churns, there are multiple parties involved. There's a steady stream of emails. So we use a lot of products made by Prime Infotech as well, as you might know. And going forward, not only will we rely on these tools, they make life easier. They are they are used every day by every lawyer of almost every major law firm uh, for every kind of transaction, as well as in the future, because AI is still evolving and we are increasingly realizing how much easier life can become with the efficient use of AI. That adoption is on an arc learning curve right now. So, some industries are already, early movers. They are demonstrably using AI to great effect. Law firms will, I suspect, be a little more conservative about adopting AI until they see demonstrable scale and efficiency. They will be a little more careful. And at the same time, human oversight will always remain, which is anyway the hallmark of responsible AI. But a lot of the grunt work, a lot of the endless hours that lawyers spend in processing documents, looking at documents, reviewing, comparing documents, work share, compare, and everything else, uh, will be reduced and is already being reduced by existing technological tools. And going forward, I can imagine it will only get enhanced so that lawyers can utilize their time, you know, for better things and can handle more work in that same span of time.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, my last question. What advice would you give to young lawyers aiming to combine academia with legal work?
So, firstly, I would like to say that, I mean, it's not a necessity. It is coming from your interest. If an individual wants to, they can. But otherwise, it's not absolutely mandatory for anything, like for personal evolution, for professional growth. So if there is interest on that front, it is not necessarily a very easy balancing task. So I have done this in stages. I haven't done this simultaneously yet. I know some senior lawyers, including partners in my firm, of their own accord, of their own interest, have done that. They have, in their own time, out of their own volition, gone out and offered courses in major law universities, law schools. It obviously there's a time factor, right? Like there are demands, transactional demands, client demands. You have to grow your business, etc. So, but at the same time, I think lawyers ultimately realize that they can't be emotionally disconnected from a subject that they ultimately like and love. So it helps reaching out to the next generation and imparting whatever practical experience they have gained. uh, so you have to see what is the right fit in terms of the time balance. I think that is the tricky bit, and one can figure it out, but it is not a necessity, Mr. Barani.
Thank you, thank you. So now let's go to the second round, the personal understand Dr. Bharat as a person. Tell us about your family and formative years.
So, I mean, I think very mainstream, nothing very extraordinary. I grew up in Calcutta, and immediately after after school, I went to law school. And I used to do a lot of theater when I was a kid, including in Calcutta. So that, interestingly, I realized I used to debate a lot and do a lot of theater. So interestingly, I've seen that these things, I mean, I never honestly, no one is a professional debater, right? And no one is, and I didn't want to get into theater acting as a professional in the future. These were things that I did on the side because they interested me and because I had the time. As a young person, you have enough time to try out different things, and I did, and I'm glad I did because it helps you in different ways in life, in other areas of life. It helps you think clearly, express clearly, helps you empathize, including with clients, and helps you think out of the box sometimes. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it's very pleasantly invigorating for me to realize that okay, some experience from my past, whether in theater, in debating, or something else, helps you in terms of your professional trajectory as well. And after that, I went to law school. I joined S&R Associates. I spent a few years here. Then I moved back to Calcutta because of personal family reasons. I was there for a bit. I was working on the side. And then I went for my master's and then my PhD in Boston. I spent a fair amount of time intermittently in the US. And then I ultimately came back to India. I taught law at Jindal Global University for a few years. And then I rejoined S&R full time because, it's home for me. And here we are.
Wow, interesting journey. So now, uh, how has your extensive international experience shaped your personal worldview?
I don't know how it has. I know it has. I won't be able to explain to you how it happens in small ways, right? So, for example, if I ask anybody how has that experience, that trip, that stint, those 2002 to 2003, 2003 to 2005, for example, how has that made you the person you are today? It'd be difficult for them to explain so similarly, but it just broadens your mind. That exposure itself is great. So other than learning itself, the curricular activities, the kind of people you meet, the diversity of opinions you see, the different cultures you're exposed to, indirectly and directly, both. I think that helps you on an everyday basis as you ultimately come back to your home country, as is the case with me for now, to relate to other people, to relate to familiar cultures, to familiar habitats, to familiar kind of ecosystems. It helps. And it just makes you, I think, a more well-rounded individual. So I'm always deeply grateful for for those opportunities.
Wow. So are you still in touch with your international colleagues?
Oh yeah, I cherish those experiences. It's everyone is busy, right? Everyone is busy with life, so it doesn't happen on an everyday basis or a weekly basis. But from time to time, when they're visiting India or the next time I go to the US, I look forward to meeting up with all of them. And we do Skype calls, WhatsApp video calls from time to time. It's great to be in touch.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Outside your professional life, Deborshi, what are your go-to activities for unwinding?
Uh, so because work takes up a lot of everyone's time after a certain age, then you sort of increasingly rely on core group of friends from I don't know, school days or something like that. You try to connect, so you don't get a chance to connect very often, but when you do, you try to stay in touch, uh, and you have a small cohort of people, whether it's family or close friends, that you ultimately get down to where you are the real you. Of course, colleagues also make up an important part of mental health, and just feel connected. Other than talking shop, that helps. And my go-to activity that I enjoy reading, I enjoy reading a lot of science fiction, watching a lot of science fiction. I try to keep up to date with some of the new shows which are coming up, but it's an uphill and often losing battle because you can't keep up. And then you try to do the best you can when you have time. I try to work out as well. Like exercise, I think is very important, but not just from physical health point of view, but a mental health point of view. And you try to protect yourself from the vagaries of age and generally the environment. So that helps.
Oh, yeah. So, Deborshi, do you have a favorite travel destination place that inspires you?
Not really. I like to spend a fair amount of time in a different location. So, the kind of travel that work affords you is difficult for me to enjoy. So that way, I really loved my time in the US because I was immersed in a different place for a long time. I want like to belong to a place to enjoy it more, fully. And whether you take a holiday to Australia, to Europe, to Southeast Asia, to the Middle East, wherever, to Africa. Uh, those are very short trips where you try to put everything together. But I really enjoyed my time in Africa. I took almost a decade ago. We went on a safari, and I loved it because it was very new for me, and it's fairly common. I understand to ultimately go then, and one of those typical safaris. Nothing very novel. It's not that I fought with a lion or anything in the wild, but it just overwhelms you, and it's moving away from familiar environs that way helps.
Wow. Okay. From a bucket list, now we've got few days remaining for 2024. What would you like to do for personal and professional?
I look forward to all the regulatory changes that we are on the cusp of in India, especially, including obviously globally. I'm very excited about what is to happen. And sitting where we are today in 2024 November, I think even people who are doing this work, it's impossible for them to accurately or intelligently predict what kind of situation we'll have in, say, by 2030, in terms of the environment, in terms of climate finance, in terms of ESG, in terms of data protection, in terms of AI, especially. So it's very exciting to be in India at this point of time, actually, and look at regulatory law, look at technology, and be looking at it from a professional point of view, as opposed to just being a fly on the wall or being just an overlooker of the wider ecosystem. So these are things which, as geeky as it sounds, excite me. And I'm very happy to be a very minute and small and it's insignificant part of this, wider uh, era in history. And I think India is a great place to be in at this time. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Bharat, who has been a significant influence in your life and career?
So many people have, right? As is the case with many other people as well. But I can't think of any one in particular. Of course, my parents, my mother in the formative years has been an influence. I have learned a lot from some of my close friends as well. And the important thing is, you learn from your friends across a diversity of sectors. Like I've learned a lot from my academic colleagues, from my peers when I was at Jindal University, and not just lawyers or professors of law, but even from economics. I remain in touch with them. They are an important part of my life, some of them in particular. Uh, and, my colleagues at S&R, especially my senior colleagues, Sandeep and Rajat, after whom S&R Associates is named, have been very important, champions of what I hold very dear in terms of who has what kind of lawyer you want to be, their attention to detail, their vision, the way they look at legal practice, uh, the principles which they abide by, and that has, because I started my life at S&R, I guess, more importantly, so that has become my guiding set of principles. So it's been all of them.
Wow. Okay. So, Deborshi, are there any particular cultural or social causes you are passionate about supporting?
So, because I look at ESG, I'm obviously very mindful of the environment and climate change. Some of my friends, some of whom are clients as well, and some of my friends, including a few friends I made and remain friends with at the Fletcher School, and who are doing very cutting edge climate change work in their respective organizations. And this is something which affects us all, which affects us already. And some of the prospects for the future are scary. So, and it's not that uh, the world is unaware of this. And this is something I feel very strongly about. I, of course, work in a silo about this, right? I'm only looking at it from a policy or a legal or regulatory point of view. But all the actors, all the relevant actors need to come together. As we speak right now in Baku, Azerbaijan, COP29 is happening, where world leaders are congregated to discuss climate change goals of the future, including climate finance. And this is something that I feel strongly about, as everyone should, frankly. Uh, and in terms of technology, I know there are some fears about AI, and those are very justifiable, legitimate fears. And that is also something I'm concerned about. I'm excited about it at the same time, but I'm concerned about the fact that how it may disrupt wider sectors, wider industries. It's not necessary that it will disrupt or have negative consequences for the wider cross section of populations around the world, but there are certain major changes that it will cause over a very short period of time. So, because of the speed with which technology changes, countries, governments, peoples, sectors, that is something we need to be mindful about. And to the extent that we can adjust and anticipate future flux, I would like to contribute to the limited extent I can. Uh, and that's also what some intrigues me, and I feel passionate about it as well, like you said.
Thank you. Okay, my last question, which will be a googly one. Describe Deborshi in one line.
Deborshi is someone who is always happy and looking forward to learn new things.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, now let's have some fun, the rapid fire round. Your go-to comfort food.
Kebabs.
Ooh. Okay. Books or podcast?
Books.
Wow. Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
Okay. Tea or coffee?
Coffee. Here we are.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Best piece of advice you have ever received?
Don't take yourself seriously.
Most inspiring city you have visited?
Boston.
So you did well, and you won this book. It will be autographed and delivered to you. So,
Thank
friends,
you.
it was a lovely conversation we had with Dr. Bharat Deborshi. Sorry, Dr. Deborshi Barat, and his passion about ESG and how you want to contribute. Yes, it's a very important subject. We got to know understand the role of a legal counsel in a law firm, his areas interest in AI, tech, ESG, data privacy. Watch this episode when it's published on the Coffee Corner show, where we have over 250 plus episodes with different subject experts and topics. If you want to be featured as a guest speaker, visit our social media handles, our website, the Emerging India Forum, and fill in the form or leave a comment. Our team will connect with you and we would invite you to have coffee conversation on a different topic. So stay safe, enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Virani.